Brilliant. Okay, finally there. So, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining the Midlands Non-Profit User Group, which is completely virtual, which is why we've got people from all over the UK and over, well, the world here, which allows us to have wonderful people like Shari and Debbie presenting for us. So my name's Emma Keeling. I'm the leader of this wonderful group, and I have done this for a while now. And we've done lots of presentations on lots of different things, and we've got some wonderful speakers for you today. I'm hoping everybody can see my presentation. No. Oh,
No,
well, that's good, isn't it?
We just see your desktop at the moment.
Oh, amazing. Maybe if I press the right button. Brilliant. There we go. How's that? Fantastic. Well, anybody who's watching the recording, that was interesting, right? So, a big welcome to everybody. So glad to see some familiar faces and some new people as well. So, welcome. Here's our approximate agenda for today. So, I've just opened the virtual doors, which is fantastic, and people have come in, which is great. We are going to do a quick round of welcomes from Shari and Debbie, and then Shari's going to talk to us all about DLRS or DLRS. I'll let Shari explain all of that when we get there. Then Debbie is going to talk to us about the Summer 24 release, because there's some so exciting things in there that wasn't quite grammatically correct. But anyway, normally we try and put things like that in more just like say, well, you know, the admin group will cover it. But there were so many things jam-packed into this release that makes such a big difference for admins, particularly from like back-end user management and stuff like that, that we were like, we need to talk about this. And Debbie was like, yeah, I'll do it. I need to learn all of this stuff myself. What more can you want? So that's great. And then at the end, we're going to have a duck race, which we normally do. If you've been before, you'll be familiar. It's not a live duck race, it's on the screen. And we give away swag. Now, to be really clear, we only are able to give away swag to people who live in the United Kingdom, which therefore means that a few people won't be involved. Now, I know some of you live overseas, so I won't be checking in with you. I'm so sorry, Lorraine, because I know that you're outside of the United Kingdom. This is mainly for postal costs. However, if I'm not sure where you're based, please excuse me when I send you a message saying, can you just confirm you're in the UK? I will do that as this is going on, just so we can make sure who needs to be in the duck race. You also need to be here for the duck race, otherwise it becomes a little unfair. So anyway, without further ado, I am going to welcome our two rock stars. I decided they were called while I did this. So we've got Shari, who I took this photo. Well, I didn't. Somebody took a photo of me and Shari. Shari said it's a great photo, and I just cropped her head out of it. So this is Shari, and Shari is a good friend of mine and is going to talk to you all about DLRS. And then there's Debbie. I'm going to say Debbie's also a good friend of mine, but I haven't just got my friends to present, I promise. But they're great people. I'm sure many of you already know Debbie as a frequent attendee. So I'm going to hand over now. Shari, Debbie, both of you, please just introduce yourselves and then we can crack on.
Excellent. I am Shari. I am actually one of the people that can't be in the duck race because I am in the US. I'm in Minneapolis or Minnesota. And I am a Salesforce partner, consulting partner, which means I work with nonprofits and foundations, mostly in the US. And I am the co-leader of the mouthful, declarative lookup rollup summaries, or DLRS, open source commons team. So I will pass it to Debbie to introduce herself.
Thank you. I'm Debbie Nevin, Systems Manager at the Down Syndrome Association. I've been working with NPSP on Salesforce since 2019, so almost at my 5-year milestone here. And before that, I was working as a fundraiser, and then I worked just with nonprofits, supporting them with a different software. So basically working with nonprofits for over 20 years. So yeah, very happy to be here, and I'm in Gloucester in the UK. And like Shari, I get involved with the community sprints, and I'm on the memberships team. So had some fun with that. So yeah, look forward to sharing my knowledge with you later.
Okay, amazing. So, Shari, the floor is all yours. Please feel free to share and introduce us to the wonders of DLRS.
Excellent. I am going to share my screen, which means that Emma, your screen will stop sharing. I think that's okay. Let me know if you can't see my screen. It should be a lovely picture of Lionheart Astro. And if you've seen me present at other things like Mid-Atlantic or Nonprofit Dreaming, these might feel familiar to you because it's about the same presentation. All right. So the first thing is, this is me again. This is my other favorite picture, though it needs to be replaced by the one that Emma took because this one is 4 or 5 years old now. That I think I've already told you all that you need to know about myself. I was an accidental admin originally. I worked at a nonprofit, and the person that was managing Salesforce got walked out the door for some issues, and they asked if I knew how to turn off his user. And that was my introduction into Salesforce because I had just expressed interest and had just gotten admin access like the week before. So today, we're going to quickly define what rollups are. We're going to give you an overview of DLRS. We're going to do a demo with the new wizard that just came out about a month ago. And then if you all have any questions, I'm happy to answer those. Also, feel free to unmute or put something in the chat or anything while I'm talking, and I'll watch for that. And hopefully we'll be able to answer your questions. All right. The first thing we need to do is all get on a first name basis with declarative lookup rollup summaries because that is a mouthful. DLRS is her formal nickname, and that's what a lot of people call her. If you're more familiar with DLRS, a lot of us call her Dolores. This is a picture of Dolores, and if you look around, you can see lots of things rolling up like newspapers, a yo-yo. There's some roller skates there. That image was made by Michael Klodner, who is also on the Dolores team. So the rest of the presentation, I will call her Dolores. But if you need to think of her as DLRS, that is okay as well. All right. Most of us already know what rollups are, but I just wanted to kind of center us in the same language. It's basically taking data from children records and rolling it up to the parent. Things like the last case submitted date, the count of current board members, which might be affiliations or account contact relationships, to the account, a list of events that somebody attended, or the number of events that they've attended. On the Dolores documentation site, there is a whole cookbook of different recipes of ways you can use Dolores. So concatenate special relationship to organization, aka board members, relationships to accounts. If you use outbound funds, there is a section of rollups for that as well. A lot of people ask, well, why do we care about rollups? The information is already in the system. Why is it important to have on the parent? You all probably know this. It's more user friendly. Your users don't actually want to go to the related list and be like, okay, how many open cases? 1, 2, 3 open cases. They want to be able to quickly see that there are 3 open. It also simplifies reporting. You can do a account report and get information like their most recent cases or the last time somebody in the major gifts team contacted them. It can also help with segmentation. If you integrate with like a marketing tool, an email tool, you might want to be able to segment by the last time somebody donated or the last time somebody attended an event, and be able to pull lists of people into that email system just using that. It's easier to do if that information is already on the contact. So that's why they're important. That's what they are. So what is declarative lookup rollup summaries? You might think, well, I already have those rollup fields on those standard ones that come with Salesforce that I can do master detail rollups with. I can do them through flows. I can kind of make that happen. The real goal of DLRS is to, one, give a more simple way to do those rollups. You don't have to be an expert in flow to do it. It's just an interface where you're entering the details of the rollup. But also, it goes beyond kind of typical rollup fields in Salesforce. You can even do it on lookups. You can also do it on text ID fields, which is sometimes mind-blowing to people. You don't actually need a lookup relationship. You just need the ID, because a little secret, a lookup field in the back end, just an ID field. You can also roll up sales or you can roll up infinite levels. You can go up to the parent account if you'd like to. And there's more options. I'll show you in a moment. You can do account distinct or concatenate a first and last. There's just a lot more that you can do in terms of how you're rolling up data. And then the last thing is it can be both real-time and scheduled. And so you can trigger it when you edit a record. You can also just schedule it to run once a month, once a year, once a day, once an hour. And you can kind of schedule that so it's not using your resources, but also if you think about like relative dates, like last year or this year, that will change over time and there's no edits to the record. So it's a great way to use DLRS. There are a lot of people using DLRS. These are new numbers that we just got. There are 26,000 active production installs of DLRS, and 22,000 of those used DLRS in the last 90 days, which means it's not just something that people are installing and then not using. A lot of people are actually using them. And there's been 1,641 installs so far in 2024. That was as of about a week ago. We've been averaging about 2,000 installs a year. So the fact that we're already at 1,600 this year is pretty exciting for us. You'll hear us talk a lot about the Salesforce Commons program, the salesforce.org Commons program. DLRS is part of that program. Originally, it wasn't. Originally, it was developed by Andrew Fawcett, or Andy in the Cloud, with some help of a couple of volunteers in the ecosystem. In 2021, he put out a note into Twitter, actually, which is now called X, and said, I can't keep doing this. I don't have time. My responsibilities at Salesforce are getting too big. And it was connected to the Commons program. The Commons program brings together the community. I'm sure you've heard about this from Emma already, to create open source solutions that address common challenges. So apps like DLRS or indicators, or even the nonprofit how-to videos are a part of that. And so I will also say that everything that is done for DLRS and on DLRS is done by volunteers. In fact, Nitsan, I see you on the call. There was a group at the Sprint in London at the beginning of June that revised a lot of our documentation that we'll look at in a little bit after the most recent release. So it's always a group of people. There's about 15 of us on a regular basis, sometimes more active, sometimes less active. So yeah, that is DLRS in a nutshell. I am going to do a demo because that is probably the best way to see how DLRS works. I'm just using a regular org. This org has outbound funds because a little secret about my background, I was also on the outbound funds team and led that team for several years. And so that also has a special place in my heart because we created it. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to roll up the subject and the date of the most recent activity onto the account so that you can see kind of how that works. The fields I've already created right here, the latest task date and the latest task subject, I've already created the date one, and we'll take a look at that in a second. And then we'll roll up and do the subject one. All right, so what you're looking at right now is the old DLRS interface. It is you had to use a drop down to find your different roll-ups, and it had basically it has all the same fields, but there wasn't an order to them, nothing pre-filled for you. You had to type everything in. So if you click on this try our new wizard button, it takes you to the new wizard, which actually gives you what looks like a list view of roll-ups. It's not actually a list view, it's actually a Lightning Web component, but it does give you all of your roll-ups in a list, and you can actually search them. So if I'm looking for my task ones, I can find all my task ones, and it searches every column that's here. So I'll open up this contact last task date so we can look at what's there. The first thing that's new is there's actually a path at the top that tells you whether or not you've completed all the things you need to do for the roll-up. Because not only do you have to fill in some of these fields, you do need to, this is a scheduled one, so you might need to schedule the job, and you need to deploy a trigger, and then you need to activate. And so these are all checked, so I know that this is active in my system already. But basically, you're going to name it, and we'll go through this together. You find the child object and what fields you want to roll up and the relationship, and then where you want to put it. Where I'm going to get to down here is the calculation modes, because that can be a point of confusion for people. So I want to pause and just talk about those before I actually build a roll-up for you. There are 4 calculation modes. And when I say calculation mode, translate that into your head, how and when the roll-up happens. So watch for changes and process later means that it's looking for an edit on the child record, and it will create a schedule record in the background. And then at a scheduled time later on, it will actually process all those rollups together. That can help with just managing your system and how many resources are used when you're saving and the time it takes to save. Real time is just what it says. You edit something, it's looking for an edit on that record, and then it rolls it up immediately. Invocable by automation, we could have called this flow, but if they come up with another declarative automation in the future, it would be able to be invocable by that automation as well. This, you can actually call a DLRS from a flow. And then developer is, you can call it from other Apex. So I will say that DLRS does use Apex classes and Apex triggers in the background. There's one other piece that we want to talk about. There's some recalculations that we can do. Recalculate now is kind of like take all the tasks in the system and roll it up to all of the accounts in the system. It's kind of the mass, like I want to do this right now and I want to kind of reset my rollups in my system. The schedule recalculation does something very similar to that, but that also allows you to roll up with relative dates. So for example, let's say you want to have all the cases from this year. Well, come January 1st, that number is going to be wrong, but there's no edit on the records to initiate that roll up. And so the schedule recalculation, you could schedule it to run on January 1st, and it would kind of refresh all of those fields that were based on last year or this year or something like that. Some people like to do the scheduled recalculations because they don't want to deploy Apex triggers in their org. Or if you're on professional edition, that's another thing that you need to be able to use. All right, let's build a roll up. I'm gonna cancel out of this one, and I'm just gonna come over here and I'm gonna click on new. And I'm going to name my roll up. Let's see, let's call it contact last task subject. I always name my rollups with the object where you're going to see the field, so the contact in this case, and then the name of the field, because that helps me remember where they are. The child object is task. I just saw a question come in, so I thought I would look at it, but I'll answer that in a second. The child object is task. I am going to aggregate the subject. See how we can like look up or start typing and it pre-fills. That's new in the new wizard. Also, it sorts the relationship field, meaning the field that the child object, the field on the child object that holds the ID values for the parent object. And so on a task, that's the who ID. It starts to try to figure out what you might want to have in here, but I can just type in who ID. I can also type in name and it will come up with that too. So it's both on the API name and if you've renamed it. The parent object is contact and latest task subject. Again, you can search for the field names because again, it used to be copy and paste and you would have to remember. I do only want to roll up completed tasks because that would be helpful. It's not super helpful to see your open tasks. And so I'm putting that relationship criteria there. This is a SOQL statement. There is some help over on our documentation page in the cookbook about writing SOQL. And then also under the FAQs, there's some help writing your SOQL. Our hope is in the next release that we'll have a SOQL writer right in the interface here in the wizard. But as you can imagine, it is more complicated than you'd like, or it's complicated to write a SOQL builder. So I am going to sort this descending by activity date. Again, this is another one where you need to know a little bit of SOQL to make it work. And again, our hope is to have a builder in there. I am going to put it in watch for changes and process later. And I'm going to leave it the sharing mode system. We didn't talk about this before, but if you want users to only be able to roll up things that they have access to, you can do it based on their user. I run almost all of mine based on the system so that I can make the roll up fields, the fields that are going to show the roll-ups read only. And so they can't edit them directly. The other thing you'll notice is that on the new wizard, the advanced section is closed. It gets complicated. Sometimes you have to add a little bit of test coverage. There's documentation on it, but most of the time you can just ignore it. So nicely, it's closed for us. I'm going to click create and cross my fingers that in a live demo, everything works. And so it says deployment completed because all of the details that are on this rollup are actually stored in your custom metadata. So, all right, everything, I've already scheduled my job, and I'll show you that in a second. And I've already deployed a trigger. If those things hadn't already been done, I would be able to do that in that interface. I'm going to go back in here because we don't need to deploy it. It does let me know that I still need to activate it. And so I'm going to save and activate. I'm going to activate it and go back into it. And then what we can talk about now is actually scheduling. What you can do is you can I am actually going to just recalculate it now so we can see it, and then we're going to look at the schedule feature. So I'm going to recalculate now. You'll see it goes back to the old version for a second and comes back in. And then we're going to go to the new wizard again. And one thing I should say is that the new wizard is in quote unquote beta. Doesn't mean that it's a real beta. It just means that we know there are some things that are not perfect and we're still working on it. So if you ever have feedback, there's a community page. You can do it in GitHub. There's lots of things you can do. So we do also have a new scheduling feature. If you've used DLRS before, there was an old version that was a little bit complicated. This tries to help you figure out, like, if you want to do it once every day, once every hour, once every 15 minutes, you can come in here and be like, I want to do it every hour on the 20 of the hour. And then I can click schedule and it will add that to the schedule up here. And then you can see when everything is running. Now, to be clear, this schedule runs for every roll up that is watch for changes and process later. It grabs all of those scheduled items and it runs it at that certain time. But that does it for all of them across the board. So just an awareness of that. But that's the new scheduling interface. So let's go over to Lisa and refresh her and see what's there. And I see a question about Apex triggers. You don't need to know Apex at all to use DLRS. It's just what it's using under the covers to do all of the work. The interfaces are kind of like a declarative interface so that you can manage the Apex. So hopefully that's helpful. So the latest task subject rolled up, call regarding gift. And that is the last task that was completed back in April on the 15th. And so those two things match. That is DLRS. I saw some questions come through, but feel free to pop some more in the chat if you have them. Let's see, Debbie, your question was if I wanted to roll up on household to show the youngest child and the oldest child. Yeah, it would need to recalculate to update the date as they age. That's exactly. You'd run it either on a daily basis, or if you're like, you know what, I don't care if it's slightly out of date, you could run it on a monthly basis. Because that, like, the age of the child is important, but if they turned 8 this month or 8 next month, it's less important typically, but you could do that. It's a perfect example of using those relative dates. Any other questions? Right.
So I have a question about upgrading.
Yeah.
So if you're on a current version, or if you're on, so I'm on, it's like one of the orgs I'm working with is on, I think, 2.17. Now it says really nicely in your documentation that it implies I don't need to upgrade, but I don't know if I've misunderstood that.
You do need to upgrade. We don't do push upgrades. So you'd need to go in and install the upgrade. You can do it from the installation page. It does use meta deploy. Once you've done that update, you don't need to do anything else. Unless you're on a version that starts with a 1 right now, then over here in the instructions, there's an upgrade page that walks you through what you need to do if you're currently on a version that starts with 1. And to figure that out, you would go into your installed packages. I'm assuming most people know this, but just in case you don't, if you look at installed packages in your setup area, it will tell you what version you're on. So you could find DLRS in here. Does anyone else think they should, I don't know, alphabetize these? Right here, we're on 2.21, which is the most recent one. But if you were on one that said a 1, you'd have to do a couple of extra steps. So, but yeah, you do have to manually update every time we do a release.
Which is exactly what I thought, to be honest. And maybe I'm not reading the documentation correctly. It just in the current release notes, it says something about there's 2 ways to access the new wizard in the manage lookup rollup summaries, blah, 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 as long as you're on a version that starts with a 2. I was like, I am on a version that starts with a 2, but I don't think this is going to be here.
I should update this so that this is more prevalent. Once installed, there are 2 ways. So you have to first install it. But I will make that more prevalent because apparently...
I'm sorry, Shari, but no, but that is awesome. I assumed that was the case. So cool. So if you've already got it, there is, as you say, there's definitely steps all in here about if you're on a version starting with a 1. But if you've never installed it before, you can just start again. Oh, Yvonne's just said the team updating that documentation must have missed that. That's hilarious on the basis that Yvonne was part of that team as well. That's great.
Yes, Yep, I was going to say you'll see a lot of Ivan and Nitsan's work in the documentation. We worked really hard at the London Sprint. So
Absolutely. You absolutely
there
did.
you go.
Okay, amazing. So
Okay.
any more questions
I
for
will.
Shari?
There you go.
Can I ask a question about if it's not quite working as you expect or not working, how do you debug what you've done? Are there
Debug.
logging and things?
You can use debug logs and all of that if you want. So that's how I debug it. I would use debug logs. A lot of times what I do, we talked about creating something like, what are the first 4 things you need to look at? That's not in the documentation yet. Typically what I look at first is, did I deploy my Apex trigger? Did I schedule it? What is it running as? Is it only failing on this record? You know, those sorts of questions. And then usually it's a matter of either your trigger isn't deployed or you have the wrong calculation mode selected for what you want to do, or the schedule isn't scheduled. So,
Thank you.
Yvonne has another good question. How do you transfer the running user? You don't actually need to transfer the running user for the rollups. You shouldn't have to do anything. A lot of people like to transfer the ownership of the records, but because it's stored all in custom metadata, it doesn't need that, and because it runs as system and not as a particular person, or if it's running as the person who's logged in. So you don't have to do any of those updates.
Amazing.
Unlike
so if someone
the scheduled
leaves,
stuff for
you don't have to worry
NPSP,
about
yeah.
that.
Yep.
That's good to know, because that's always a question that comes up. Amazing. Okay, well, I think
I have a quick question.
Go for it, Debbie.
So if you're doing a roll up from campaign members, but you only want a certain type of campaign, can you get it to look for the details on the campaign, or would you have to copy that field to the campaign member to then be able to filter by it?
You can look for the details on the campaign by going, it's like you follow the trail, like it's like campaign member dot campaign dot those,
Yeah.
like in Sockwell. If you know Sockwell, like that's how you can kind of breadcrumb your way through there.
Great. That's just, yeah, one of the use cases I've got for it. So yeah.
And
And
I will
also
say,
say, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Shari, like the Dolores community group on the Trailblaze community is really active. Like I sit on a Monday morning, I sit there in bed when I wake up, like going through the emails because I'm on my weekly subscription, of posts. And the Dolores group always has loads in there, and there's always people answering questions. So I would also say, if you get stuck, Debbie, like that's going to be a common one that somebody's done, right?
Cool.
And the people answering the questions, if you ever see Anthony, he's our developer. He's the one who built the tool. And then there's a couple of other people on the team that are specifically assigned to respond to questions. And so that's another, like it's people who, typically the people that are responding are people on the Dolores team.
You briefly touched up on how we can do a roll up with, I don't know how to put it, but a lookup is only an ID.
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean that I can potentially do a roll up on a quote unquote parent object, even though it is not really related to the child?
Correct. Yep. Instead of the relationship field on the wizard being a lookup field, you just pick an ID field. Like I used the who ID. That's not actually a lookup, right? Like that's a different kind of field, but it stores an ID. It's
Okay.
what is polymorphous? Something.
Polymorphic field or something.
Yeah, polymorphic field. Yeah.
Yeah. I take that as Salesforce telling us that, hey, look, we can do anything and we will just make an exception.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
Amazing. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Debbie and let Debbie start talking to us about summer 24. Shari still, I think, Shari, you hanging around?
I am. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. So feel free to ask. I'm sure Shari will pick up some questions in the chat if needs be. Yeah, I'll hand over to Debbie.
Thank you. I shall share my screen, hopefully. Right. Can you see? Let me just shrink all the people. Can you see my presentation? Oops. Start from the right page.
Yes, we can see your presentation. It's not in presentation mode, but you maybe don't mind.
Yes, my lovely Zoom controls are right over that bit.
You should be able to drag them out the way.
Will that do it?
Yes.
There we go.
That was beautiful.
So yes, I've tried to put everything in my presentation with links and everything, so hopefully that'll be useful for later. Here at the Down Syndrome Association, we use MPSP, so I've looked at all the different release note sources based on what we use with MPSP. So the topics, I've kind of grouped things where I can to sort of the great changes in this release with the Lightning app page design, a lot there. Lots of, like Emma said, security and permissions, flow, broke out screen flow because there was so many changes, wanted to kind of show them. Some other features, and then I figured I'm bound to have missed stuff that you think is useful, so we'll have a bit of discussion so people can share what they found, their nuggets. So first of all, it's the Lightning app page design. Now, what I'm actually going to do is go to my sources that I've got and go through here to see, rather than reinvent the wheel by showing and making up stuff, I'm going to show you what I found. So Jen's blog is a great place for a resource for anybody who hasn't found it already. And I'm going to start from showing, because she's also got lovely little GIFs that show you how these things are used. So here is the custom fields on the dynamic forms. So now I've got to remember as well. I must apologise. I did put this together a couple of weeks ago and I haven't had time to look at it since. So might be a bit hesitant, but I love that Jen's GIFs in her blog kind of show you what you need to know really quickly. And I'm just trying to remember what to see. So the where it's used, was that the one? I'm going to start really badly. I'm sorry about that. Hopefully that'll make sense. If you use things, it'll show you where the field's used with the dynamic forms. Then we've got the history. So instead of having to do it individually, you can see all of the field history. So at the moment, isn't it, you have to go into each object and track it. So this is a really helpful, quick tool.
And how cool are those GIFs on the basis that
I know, I love them.
You haven't got to go into like different videos and all of that. You just go in there and then it's almost like Debbie is clicking on stuff and showing us, but she's not. I think it's magic. Totally magic.
Yes, Jen is a great resource because she also does the automation hour, doesn't she? So then next, add a field to a Lightning page. I could just scroll through the whole of this, but there's a couple of things she's mentioned I'm kind of still useful, but I'm not going to cover. Sorry, I've forgotten already what I was talking about. So this one is a really good one because I find it we've got a dynamic form for our contact page, and the number of times you add a field and then you have to come out and go into the Lightning app and add the field that way. And it's just really nice to be able to start adding it when you add the actual field. the same way as you can currently add it to any page layout. So I just find that really useful. Not that I'm making that many changes to my contact page, but it's the little things, isn't it, that make your efficiencies in your day. Component visibility on tabs. This is a nice one. So we've got that thing, you know, like where you've got your donor summary. We've moved our donor summaries onto a tab. And so it's really nice to be able to hide that for users who don't need to see it, rather than just not too far in the way having the tab up there. But, you know, it's that one step further for locking things down, that people don't need to see it. It doesn't need to be there.
You also
really
then
handy.
don't get the awkward question of like, why is there a tab and no data on it? What can't I see?
Yeah.
When really you're like, yeah,
What am I
I
missing
didn't
out
want
on?
you to realize that you can't see it, but we don't give access to everybody.
Yeah. One thing I haven't checked, which I really need to, is, you know, it was the stage when you made a new record, even if things were on a different tab, it would be on the create record page, wouldn't it? So I don't know if anybody's had a test of that one. I must admit, I've not tested it yet to see if that's the case. But that's another frustration, in that difference between what you see on a view page versus a new record page. By the way, I can't be like Shari and look at the chat at the same time. That's just too much distraction for me.
You're absolutely fine, Debbie. I will keep a close eye, but there's nothing. One was me posting the link to the page. One was someone telling us they were leaving. So you're okay.
Cool. So we've also got some lovely design features to make things look a bit cleaner. And there's the blank space one, which I'm sure some of you have heard, but I've had that a few times, you know, where your fields kind of shuffle up and down and things with different fields, and you want to align things a bit more logically. So you can now use blank spaces to pad that out and have it just look a lot more user-friendly. So just let this play enough time so you can see Jen do her stuff. So I think that's that one. The next one is, there is quite a lot to cover, so I will try not to hover too much, because again, all these links are in there, so you can always go back and have another look later on if I whiz past something too quickly. Rich text headers. So that's really cool, that you can kind of create focus on things and just have things looking a bit more, I don't know if it's modern or not. Is that such a way to say things anymore? There was that one. One of the other things that wasn't so good, which I think Mark said it could be good, it could be, and then it sort of could be bad, is that accessibility thing of resizing the field. So when the second column's hidden, the field will expand to fill the whole screen, which can be good, but also for some users, that distraction of things going bigger and smaller, if you're looking at different records where there is and there isn't, that could actually be an accessibility issue. So something to think about when that's happening. Next, we move on to security. So freezing and unfreezing permissions. And that's really good that you can give somebody who is sort of helping with managing users these permissions without having to give them the whole system admin, isn't it? I know I've got a user, and mostly what she does is create new users, set passwords, and reporting and stuff. So she actually probably doesn't need any other admin permissions. So I'm looking forward to having capacity to go and think about that and put it in place for her. And I think this is also going to be useful. Is it for the when you've got an Experience Cloud site and you've got your users on there? So is that managing those users as well? Perhaps one of the goals of having that.
I think they're also aiming for that. What is that? I'm sure it's written in there, something like system of least privilege or whatever it is, to give people, you know, I think being able to say give management teams access to freeze and unfreeze users
Yeah.
I'm sure, particularly in many corporate environments, I've been there with the, we're going to do a disciplinary meeting right now, and at the end of it, we're going to be deciding whether they're being suspended. So we may need them frozen. Please, can you be around at 3 o'clock on, Tuesday? And it's that level of also, why should anybody be telling anybody that that's what's going to happen? Whereas, many corporates will like this because, and I'm saying corporates, it's going to be everywhere, but I think definitely that where HR is very tight, needing to be able to just have, management have that permission and they can just go freeze somebody. And even, freezing people, some industries want it to be super tight, like somebody's on holiday, let me take them out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're right, like freeze users, as Mark said, Experience Cloud, and also things like holidays, long-term sickness, helping people cover while they're on holiday. If Debbie's on holiday and somebody else can have access just to freeze users, that's better than no access to do anything at all, right?
Yeah. The next one is the cool one. Finally, you can view all the permissions in one place. These are so cool. It's going to be so useful to sort of see who has what and to be able to drill down. So, and it's on all sorts of places, isn't it? So we've got the user view summary of what's on that user. We've got the permission set and permission set group. You can view the summary of what's included there. And it just takes that sort of, do they, don't they, should we remove it from this group? And there's the group, and then also public groups. And viewing the summaries on those too.
And I think this for me is one of the main reasons I got Debbie to talk about this today, to be fair, because this is such a time saver. Things that historically you may have thought, you may have had to say, yes, we can look at that, but it's, time. Yeah. You can at least here get some high level of like, what does this do? What access do they have? I know I've been doing a piece of work for a client around that's meant I've needed to look at permissions, and the amount of time it's taken me compared to historically has just been squashed, and it's not fun work, right? Trying to figure that out. It's not like the sort of thing where you're like, oh, but this is fun. It's like, no, it's not fun. So I think, yeah, it's really cool. Really cool. Yeah. And the sort of thing, just, I would say after this, maybe go and enjoy the sun if you're in the UK or wherever you are in the world, but equally just being able to go and jump into the back of your org, go and look at some fields, go and look at some permission sets, go and look at some groups, and just go and click on those buttons. And all of a sudden you're going to go, oh, now I can see this. Now I can see that. I couldn't see that before. Wow, that's helpful, because it is amazing what's included in there, right?
Definitely. And I like that they've grouped it in that way, so you can sort of really sort of not just see everything as one list, isn't it? It's actually grouped fairly logically for being able to sort of track things down. Be helpful as well when people can't do stuff they think they should. So yeah. So then this one with your automating permission access with user access policies. So that's great when you've got temporary stuff. So maybe you've got some volunteers coming in to do stuff over the summer, isn't it? And you can assign access and then revoke it after the summer without having to go in and manage the whole lot of them. That was the first case I could think of. You've got,
yeah, I mean, I was going to say like, well, I was going to say just setting up new, so the amount of orgs that I've worked in for, let's say, smaller non-profits, where actually they have a system admin and then everybody else's permissions are pretty similar, right? They may have the odd extra permission set, but they're quite similar. Just being able to set up a user access policy based on, if the profile is this, please give them this permission set, or this permission set group. Please put them in this public group. Great. Because at the moment, when you think about it, you have to go through and you're like, oh, okay, so Bill's joined us. What does Bill need? Oh, okay, well, I'll give Bill that. Let me go find somebody he looks like. Who else? Oh, okay, and I quite often have to say to people, look at somebody who's the same. So go look at John. He's the same. What's he got? He's got these permission sets. He's in this group. actually just be able to set this up in the background and just be like, when you set up your new person, they're going to get the base level access. And then if Bill now needs reports, well, that can be a separate permission set. I think this is a big part of what was missing from when Salesforce tried to make the push for everybody to move from profiles to permission sets. I think this is what was missing, right? That ability to, yeah, but it's easy for me to just pick the profile, because I had, in a bigger organization, maybe I had 100 profiles because that gave them all their access. You're expecting me now to go through and put in a group and a group and a group and a group and whatever that is. So I think this should be a time saver. And it wasn't, I had a play with it for a client because they were interested in using it, and it was really simple to use, really simple to set up.
And yeah, I think with our migrating, isn't it, to permission sets from profiles?
Yeah, historically, Mark said it might be worth reading through. There might be some limitations on tooling for some Salesforce instances, but assuming everybody's on enterprise with MPSP or above, there shouldn't be any challenges there.
So I had the MFAs now on by default for direct logins, and it might impact with anyone using, whoops, hang on, where's my back button? Sorry, pressing my mouse too much. Yeah, using single sign-on, it might have an impact. So if you do that, that might be worth looking at. Monitor login history permission. I think that's another one for assigning your managers, isn't it? That you can kind of delegate that one, so you haven't got to. Is that the one? Yeah. So then it's delegating the all work as well, isn't it? Which is good. Anything you don't have to do. Do the more interesting stuff. These were more things to do. So create and verify a default no reply. So that's in case there's a link to the article, which of course it's sort of forgotten I loaded ages ago. Come on. So this one was just to sort of say if you have any problems. I don't know if everybody might have done it already, but it's going to be enforced in winter 25, so it's probably worth making sure that's sorted. And then the other one was to add the new setup domain, so that it's that thing, isn't it, when you click on setup and it goes off to another window, and this is just to make sure you don't have problems. So there's the article that tells you how to do that. And then we were talking about permissions earlier. I don't know how many of you have seen Terry's playlist on migrating from profiles to permission sets, but he's got a nice little bite-sized pieces on his advice on how he's done it, which I'm going to work through because I think that's quite a nice logical way for us to do it. So there's that one. And then flow, lots of flow. One of the new ones is, of course, the new automation app. And I couldn't mention that without linking to Mark's blog on it. So there's lots of Mark's thoughts and coverage on here. So if you want to know more about it, and here's a quick view from Jen as well. So just, I think it is a bit odd, isn't it, having it in the front end rather than the back end from setup. But it's got some useful features. And one of the things I found was when I had it in my sandbox, I've somehow got mine in Danish for my list view names. Don't know how that happened, but it's in English for my production, so I don't mind.
That is hilarious. Please open a case about that, because I just think that's hilarious. The other thing that I was going to just say is, because Yvonne's just asked about the link from Terry, will you do me a favour, Debbie, right when you finished?
Yeah.
I bet you're going to tell me they're all in your presentation anyway, but would you also just copy me the URLs into an email, just one after another, and then I will also put them in a post in the Midlands user group as well. So if anybody just wants to pick them up through that, as opposed to also going through the presentation, you can.
Yeah, Cool, will do.
Amazing.
Yeah, but yes, there's a links page on the end of my presentation with them all as well. So
Nice.
so it's either, yeah, so it's not just in the presentation, it should be at the end as
Oh,
well.
well then that's even better. I just need the presentation. We're sorted.
Yep. So here's all your different kinds of views, and I haven't really used it much, so I don't know if anybody else has yet, but I'm liking that idea. What was the other thing I was going to cover on that one? Yeah, I've just realized the time, so I'll try and speed up a bit.
You're good.
So just some of the new functions, create records. It's just so nice. They will now do update as well, so you're not going to end up with duplicates that you might have done before if you've got your details right for the matching, which is so helpful. And also, if you're doing create records, it'll let you know the required fields, so you can make sure you don't have errors once you activate, sort of, because you've forgotten one. That I find is really useful. And there's also the new is blank and is empty operators, when it does, is it true, false, or empty? Or if it's null, there's an empty string, and all that happy stuff. So it's nice to know you can capture everything and not have records not missed because you've said it the wrong way around. If that makes sense. I must admit, I haven't actually had that problem myself, so. But locking records when the flow's updating. I don't know how much Salesforce locks records anyway. I know when I worked on databases in the past, that whole thing of locking the record before you do an update is just the way you do it. So good to know, you're not going to find changes lost because somebody else was updating it as well, but didn't realize that.
I'd love to know what the use case is for that, because like you say, Debbie,
Yeah.
I've not come across problems with that, but is it?
I suppose if you've got lots of users maybe who might be
Maybe.
updating the same records, I don't know. And it's when you think, I changed that, why is it, and because you didn't realize somebody else has edited it at the same time or something, maybe. Or the automation would try to do something, but another, I don't know. But yeah, record blocking basics, I suppose. But yeah.
If you're trying to update a parent record and a lot of children are associated, which can be manipulated by multiple people. So Salesforce always logs the parent account whenever it's updating the child record by default.
Right. That makes sense.
So that makes sense. So it locks the parent, but not the children.
It logs both. It logs the parent. So let's say you are working on a contact, so it will log the contact. It will also log the account. Now, if your flow is operating on the account, they may want to lock it.
Oh.
That's what I can say about.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I don't know.
Improved debugging, apparently. I haven't had a chance to use this to see what's what. But that can only be a good thing to help us track down.
So I'm going to pop in. Oh, sorry. The one you just mentioned, the being able to debug as a user is super helpful. Because you can go in and see why that flow isn't working for that particular user that just raised their hand and said, this isn't working. Okay. I'm getting that error.
Great. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it like that. Or maybe you hadn't read it like that recently. No, that's a good one, definitely. And goes back to all your permissions, doesn't it? That one, probably. Transform instead of loops. Now that's one I've read about but not seen. I don't know if I've got it down here. There you go. There's no screenshots on that one, so I'm not quite sure, but you can use transform instead of loops apparently.
I did look at that, and there are a few helpful videos on YouTube that show what it does. My understanding is it's basically you take a host of records and you want to clone them, and the transform helps you to map from one side to the other. So you're cloning the same records with a different ID or something like that when you want to clone records.
Great. Thank you. yeah, the grouping on flows on the entry, I'm personally not liking that so much, but you know how if you go in now, instead of picking it, you've got to like say start from scratch instead of just picking record type, screen flow, whatever. And it's just like an extra step. So
Yeah,
it seems
the
like a
other
nice
thing,
idea, but
yeah, the other thing I will warn people of is I went, and it's not necessarily a big thing, but I went into a flow the other day to do something and then was like, oh, it's not just called like record any dollar record anymore. And it was like so it was an opportunity record and it was like triggering opportunity. And I was like, what? And like these words are not the same. So what I will say is do go have a look around because it may, yeah, Janice said it threw her off as well. It just, you know, if you suddenly get like a new phone, say, it reminds me of that sort of thing. Like I know it'll still do a text, I know it'll still make a call, and I know it's all going to be in a similar place, but there was just the odd thing where I had to pause and just be like, that says something slightly different. But I think for newer users, it'll be better. Like I think the changes they've made make sense. It's just when you've used Flow for so long, it's confusing.
you kind of need a novice user or something that you can tick to then get your
well, Mark
thing.
just said he thinks it's better for new users. I think you're absolutely right, Mark. I think it's better long term. I just wanted to warn people that once you've kind of adapted that, like you do just kind of go, oh, like you've just slightly moved my cheese.
Yeah. There are Einstein for Flow updates, so you can create a flow and you can create formulae. But we can't afford to have Einstein at that level, at least I'm assuming not. So we don't use it, so I haven't covered it very much. But there I've got links, so if you use it, you can get access. And also just a little reminder that, you know, if you've got a flow and you want the new features and they're not showing, it could be you need to update your API version first to make use of them. Some ScreenFlow stuff. So that one again, your ScreenFlows need to be API 6.1 or above. And then it says they'll run the active version of the subflow, not the latest version. So then instead of picking up the one you kind of testing by mistake, there's the new action button, which is like a subflow apparently, but Simon's done a whole post on that and some with actually a step-by-step, I believe, that you can kind of work through to get your head around how to use it. And so I've linked to that one because that looks quite cool. And creating multiple records with repeaters, which is great to be able to do that. And like it says, not guess how many. So we currently use form assembly and we have like groups with their board members and we have to say, you know, on form assembly, yay, great, you can just have it increment as many times. But if I wanted to start doing that in a ScreenFlow, I would have had to have said, well, I can only capture 3 or 5 or whatever. And similar, I suppose, with households and family members, if you're sort of capturing that information, because you never know quite how big their family is going to be. So I can't remember where have I got to on here. What's that one doing? That's the reactive screens, the same as Simon's blog posts covers, and then multiple records with the repeater. So that's a nice new feature. Controlling read-only and disabled and reactive screens. So that will be useful. And Google's address lookup. So if you get, sorry, I'm aware of time, that's why I'm whizzing on a bit. So yeah, they've got a new upgraded address component, so they can use the lookup in screens, which looks good. And a few other features. So the personal labels for records, that's a user-based one, isn't it? So I've not actually had my users do that yet. Haven't told them how to use it. So, but hopefully, I don't know if that's more useful for salespeople or if it's going to be good for fundraisers to be able to say, you know, these are my particular contacts that I want to work on, and having personalized labels, isn't it? Because you're all sort of, we all look at things differently, don't we? So it's nice to be able to customize that and label it in what makes sense to us individually. The user access policy changes, have I mentioned that again? Is that the same thing? I think that's a different one. No, hang on, user access policies. No, I've got too many links open, sorry. Is it that one? There we go, yeah. Automate and migrate access policies. So another article useful on that one. If you use Nonprofit Cloud, I've put in a couple of links. So there was, Laurie posted recently on the release readiness live, some of the Nonprofit Cloud related stuff. And I also found another blog here that had those plus a couple of other things that she doesn't mention. And the only thing I could find about NPSP in this release was that it theoretically is on this version. So yeah, nothing on release notes, nothing. I couldn't make head nor tail of the GitHub stuff. So hopefully they're at least fixing stuff. And
there
then,
were a couple of random fixes in the NPSP release, but from what I could understand from chatting to somebody, it was effectively stuff that we would never notice anyway. It was a couple of back-end things that they had to put in the release notes, but yeah. So I think the big wins this time around is all the admin stuff, I think.
Yeah, because we use gift entry and there's been a few niggles with that one. So hopefully they might have put a few of those fixes in, but it's not always very clear. And then what was the other thing? Just the status salesforce.com link in case you need it to know about updates. But of course, we've all had the update now. And then I think we've sort of covered bits and pieces of what I've missed. But yeah, I haven't covered anything Experience Cloud specific, but there's a link to their release notes if you use that. And then I'll be sharing this whole load of links here from different blogs and like articles and bits and pieces I've used to construct this. And that is it. So I don't know, was there anything else in the chat, Emma, or did you keep an eye on that?
I think everything has been answered by other people and a bit of chat back and forth. So I think that's all good. I don't think there's anything outstanding. I will make sure that Debbie can send me the presentation. I believe I can upload it into the user group. So I will try. Failing that, I'm sure we can put it somewhere else. Might even just be able to,
yeah.
No, I'll figure that out. And then I would say there's lots of, I'm going to say homework reading, but that sounds awful, doesn't it? But I think there's so much stuff. I think it'll be stuff that you'll come across. There's things that you're going to look at and set up and go, oh, what is that? Why is that different? But yeah, big admin heavy release, all good stuff, I think. So yeah, thank you, Debbie. I think that was nicely timed for us to head off, and I was going to say head off and do some duck racing. So yeah. Yeah, so okay. I think Mark just pointed out there's meant to be a slide deck link in Bevy, but I've never been able to get it to work, so I won't be using that. Okay, so let's stop recording.